At 3:14 a.m., the hotel phone rang, and the caller ID showed a room that was already empty. Not a glitch, not a wrong number. Room 214 checked out 3 days ago. I know because I was the one who processed the checkout myself. I stared at that screen for a long moment. The kind of moment where your brain tells you there's a simple explanation, but your body has already decided something is wrong. I picked up. Nothing, just a faint hiss. The kind of static you get on old lines, then the call dropped. I sat back down, told myself it was a system error. Old hotel, old wiring. These things happen, but that was the first night, and things didn't stop there. My name is Daniel. Daniel Marsh. I was 26 when I took the night shift at the Callaway Grand. It's one of those older hotels, not ancient, but built in the 70s, renovated just enough to look modern without actually being modern. High ceilings, long corridors, the kind of carpet that swallows sound. I took the job because the pay was decent and honestly I didn't mind the quiet. I'm not a social person. Night shifts suited me. Most nights I'd sit behind that front desk from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., answer maybe 3 calls, check in a late arrival or two, and spend the rest of the time reading or watching something on my phone. It was a job, routine, predictable. Until it wasn't. Let me give you some context about room 2000 before I go further, because I think it matters. The guest who stayed there, the last registered guest, his name was Owen Marsh, no relation to me, I checked. He had booked for 5 nights. Paid in advance, cash at check in, which was unusual but not unheard of. He was a quiet man, maybe mid 50s. He came in with one bag, barely made eye contact, nodded when I explained the breakfast hours, and went straight to the elevator. I worked 3 of his 5 nights. And in those 3 nights, he never once called the front desk, never asked for anything, never came down to the lobby after check in. On the fourth morning, the morning he was supposed to still be there, housekeeping found the room empty. Bed made, towels folded, everything in order. His checkout date was the following day, but he was gone. Happened sometimes. People leave early, don't bother with formalities. We processed it as an early checkout, noted it in the system, and that was that. 3 days later, at 3:14 a.m., his room called me. And Dois, I told my colleague Maya about it the next evening when she came in for the overlap shift. She laughed, not unkindly, and said the system had been doing weird things lately. Phantom calls, she said. Reception desk randomly showing room numbers with no active guests. She'd heard it happen in older hotels with analog to digital switchovers. Something about the internal lines holding residual signals. That made sense. I held on to that explanation. The second call came 2 nights later. Same time, 3:11 a.m., close enough to the first that I noticed. Again, the caller ID read room 214. This time I answered faster, and this time it wasn't silence. There was breathing, slow, steady, not panicked, not threatening. Just someone breathing on the other end of a phone. The way a person breathes when they've been sitting quietly in a dark room for a very long time. Hello? I said. The breathing continued for about 4 seconds, then the line went dead. I put the phone down and sat very still for a moment. My first instinct, and I want to be honest about this, was that someone was in that room, a squatter. Someone who had found a way in, maybe a copy of a keycard, maybe a prop fire exit. It happens. Hotels are large buildings with a lot of access points people don't think about. I pulled up the room status on the system. 214 showed as vacant and locked. Keycard access log showed no entry since Owen Marsh's original check-in 5 days prior. No exits logged either, which was consistent with the door being left open or the system not recording it properly. I called our overnight security, a man named Gus, who had been doing hotel security for longer than I'd been alive. Told him I might have an unauthorized guest in 214. He went up, checked the room personally with his master key, empty, no signs of anyone. Window locked from inside, bathroom clear, closet clear. He came back down, gave me a look that said stop wasting my time, and went back to his rounds. I want to tell you that I felt relieved, but I didn't. I felt something else, something harder to name. Like when you're alone in a house and you hear a sound, go and check, find nothing, but instead of feeling better, you feel worse because now there's no explanation. And somehow that's more unsettling than finding something. A week passed with nothing. I almost forgot about it. Almost. Then the calls started coming every night, not always at the same time, sometimes 2 a.m., sometimes closer to 4. but always from room 220, always when the lobby was empty and the hotel was at its quietest. Always the same pattern. I'd answer, there would be either silence or that slow breathing, and then the line would drop. I started logging them, dates, times, duration. I don't know why. Habit, maybe, or some instinct that told me I should have a record. By the end of the second week, I had 11 entries. I showed the log to the hotel manager, a woman named Patricia. She was efficient, practical, not the type to entertain anything she couldn't put in a spreadsheet. She looked at my log, then looked at me, then called the phone system maintenance company. The technician came in on a Tuesday afternoon, spent about 2 hours with the switchboard. His conclusion, there was a fault in the legacy analog routing that caused intermittent phantom signals from decommissioned room terminals. In plain language, old wiring was misfiring and the system was misreading the source. He said he'd patched it. Patricia seemed satisfied. I nodded along. But I didn't log room 214 as a legacy terminal. I checked. It was fully updated during the renovation 2 years ago. Same digital system as every other room. I didn't mention that to the technician. I don't know why. Part of me didn't want to extend the conversation. Part of me wasn't sure I was remembering correctly. The call stopped for 4 days after the technician's visit. On the fifth night, at 3:14 am, exactly the same time as the very first call, the phone rang. Burr, room 213. I picked it up slowly this time, like I already knew what I was going to hear. The breathing was there again, but this time it was different, slower, more deliberate, like whoever was on the other end wanted me to know they were there, really there. And then, for the first time, a voice. It said one word. It said my name. Daniel. Low, calm. Not a question, not a greeting. Just my name, spoken the way you'd say it if you'd been waiting to say it for a while. I didn't respond. My mouth had gone completely dry, and something in my chest had tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The line dropped before I could say anything. I sat at that desk for the remaining 3 hours of my shift without moving. I didn't call Gus. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there with every light on that I could turn on, watching the lobby doors, watching the elevator numbers, watching the phone. It didn't ring again that night. Now, I need to tell you something here that I've thought about a lot since. Because this is the part where a reasonable person would quit, would walk out, never go back, tell their manager they found another job. And I've asked myself many times why I didn't do that. Part of it was practical. I needed the income. Part of it was stubbornness. I didn't want to be the person who quit a desk job because of a few strange phone calls. But if I'm completely honest, part of me needed to know. The same part of you that keeps listening to this right now. That part that has to understand what's in the dark even when everything else is telling you to leave it alone. 3 nights later, I did something I probably shouldn't have. Wahab, it was around 2 in the morning. Hotel quiet, no guests at the desk. I took the master key from the security drawer. We had access to it for emergency guest lockouts, and I went upstairs. Room 214 is on the second floor, end of the east corridor. The corridor lighting up there runs on motion sensors, so they flicker on one section at a time as you walk. It makes the far end of the hall look perpetually dark until you're almost in it. I stood outside the door for a moment. I don't know what I expected to find. Or I think part of me expected to find nothing, to confirm the emptiness and go back downstairs feeling foolish but settled. I used the master key. The lock beeped green. I pushed the door open. The room was dark. I reached in and hit the light switch. Everything looked normal at first. Standard room, double bed, side tables, desk by the window, bathroom door open to the left, clean, made up, undisturbed. I stepped inside, and then I noticed the desk chair. It was facing the window, which sounds like nothing. Chairs face windows. But every room in the Callaway Grand has its desk chair positioned facing the desk, facing inward. Housekeeping is trained to set it that way. It's in their checklist. This chair was turned completely around. Facing the window, facing the street below, I stood there looking at it. Not the chair itself, but what it implied. That someone had sat there and looked out at the street, sat in a dark room in an empty hotel and looked down at the world below. I walked to the window slowly, looked out. The street was empty, a single street light, a parked car, nothing moving. I turned around to leave, and I saw the bathroom mirror. The bathroom door was open, and from where I was standing, I had a direct line of sight to the mirror above the sink. And on that mirror, written in what looked like condensation, the kind of fog you get after a hot shower, were two numbers. Lee, Millie 14. I want to be precise here because I know how this sounds. I know how easy it is for a tired mind to see patterns. But I was not tired. I was more awake in that moment than I have ever been in my life. And those numbers were there, clear, written by a finger in the steam on the glass. Except the room had been vacant, no one had showered in there. There was no reason for condensation on that mirror. I left the room. I locked the door behind me. I went back downstairs and I sat at that desk and I did not move until morning. I told Maya everything the next evening, all of it. The calls, the chair, the mirror. She listened without laughing this time. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I haven't been able to shake. She said, "You know, Owen Marsh called the front desk the night before he checked out early. I hadn't known that. I hadn't worked that night. He called at 3:14 in the morning," she said. I answered. He didn't say anything. Just breathed for a few seconds, then hung up. We looked at each other. "I thought it was a drunk guess," she said. "I didn't log it. I went back to the check in records for Owen Marsh, looked at everything we had on him. Cash payment, no credit, current file. The ID he'd presented, we kept photocopies for compliance, was a driver's license. I looked at the photocopy. I don't know how to explain what I felt when I read the date of birth on that license. He would have been 55 at the time of check-in. Nothing unusual. But the address listed was a street I recognized. It took me a minute to place it because I hadn't been there in years. It was the street my grandmother used to live on, in a town 3 hours away. A town I had grown up visiting but had no connection to otherwise. Now, I want to be careful here. I know that means nothing on its own. Streets exist, coincidences exist. A man from a town you have a distant connection to is not inherently strange. But I couldn't leave it alone. I looked up the address online, cross-referenced it with the street name. The house at that address had been vacant for 2 years, owned by an estate, no residence. Owen Marsh had given a home address that didn't exist. I don't know who Owen Marsh was. I've looked. There's nothing, no record I can find that connects a man by that name to that address, to that ID, to anything. The license number came back as unverifiable when I ran it through a contact I have in local government. The calls continued for another 3 weeks after that. Then they stopped, completely. No explanation, no final call, no change. They just ended. Room 214 has had guests since. Couples, business travelers, a family with 2 kids last month. None of them have reported anything. The room functions normally, the phone works normally. I still work the night shift. I don't know if that's brave or foolish. Probably neither. Probably just inertia. But I'll tell you this. Every night around 3 a.m. I find myself looking at that phone, not afraid, exactly, just watching, waiting for something I can't explain and wouldn't know how to describe if it came. Some nights, right around 3:14, there's a moment, just a second or two, where the lobby goes very still. Sound drops out, the air feels different. And I sit there and I think about a man who gave a false address, who stayed 5 nights, who left early and clean and without a trace. I think about a chair turned to face the window. I think about 2 numbers written in steam that had no reason to be there. And sometimes, on the quietest nights, I think about the fact that he knew my name. I never told him my name. It's not on my uniform. It wasn't on any paperwork he would have seen. There's no way he should have known. But he said it, calmly, like he'd known it for a long time. The phone hasn't rung from 214 in 6 weeks now. I keep my log updated anyway, just in case.